In this tutorial, I will show you how to recreate a very cool effect from the NBC show Chuck. If you've never seen the show, the main character basically has a computer in his head that allows him to access skills he wouldn't normally have. So if anyone were to attack him, he would flash and be able to fight back. So we are going to be recreating this flash effect. To start, we need a grid of images. So we're going to work in Photoshop to create that. Go to File, New. We want it to be 1920 by 1080 or whatever size your final composition is going to be. Hit OK. Now we're going to use the Slice tool to create a grid. It's right over here. It might say crop, but if you don't see it, just click and hold and all your other options will pop up and choose Slice. Now right click on your work area, hit Divide Slice, and you're going to divide it horizontally and vertically into 10 slices each. Hit OK. Now you basically just click and drag images into each of these spaces. So what I did is I chose 10 images and I laid them out in one row, and then I just kind of repeated the same images in each row, but I moved the order a little bit just to make it look kind of random. Now you can use as many images as you want. You can use up to 100 different images, or like I did 10. You really just want it to look somewhat random. In the end, these are all going to be just flying by, and it's going to be very quick and hard to see, so it's not super important. But once you have your grid filled up with images, you go File, Save As, save it as your image file. It can be a PSD, that's fine. OK. Now we're going to go into After Effects to do a little more work on this image. So drag your image file in, and click and drag to create a new composition. Let's go up to the composition settings, make sure it's 1920 by 1080, 29.97 frames per second, and this just needs to be 1 second long. So the first thing we're going to do is make this look a little more like a grid. None of these images have borders, and in the end we want it to have just a black border. So go to Effect, Generate, Grid. Under blending mode, choose normal. That's going to put your borders on top of the image, and in color, make it black. Now, it just so happens that this grid fits our images perfectly, but you may have not created this image exactly like I did, so what you can do is go down here to this little corner point, and you can click and drag until the borders fit your image. But like I said, it fit perfectly for me on the first try. So now we've got a border. The next thing is to kind of simulate the effect of all of these images flying by. And we're going to use Effect, Stylize, Motion Tile. The only value we need to keyframe here is tile center, specifically the vertical part. We're not going to mess with horizontal. We're aiming to create a seamless looping animation of these images flying by. So your last frame here needs to look exactly like your first frame. Now an easy way to do this is to pull up a calculator. Now you see that your vertical start value is 540. So basically you want to make sure that your final value is a multiple of 540. So I'm going to use the value 2160. So start here on your first frame, hit the stopwatch to create a keyframe, go to your last frame, type in that value. Now you didn't see anything change, but that's because the first and last frames are identical. That actually might be a little bit too fast, so I'm going to pull my calculator back up and use the value 1620 instead. So now we've created our flying image grid. I'm actually going to go over here, hit enter, and rename this composition to grid just to keep track of it. But we're pretty much done with this composition and we're going to move on. So take your grid composition and create a new one. Go into your composition settings, and we're going to make this 3 seconds long. So now we have a 3-second composition but only a 1-second animation. So what are we going to do with all this empty space? We're going to time remap this layer so it loops for the length of the composition. So right click, choose time, enable time remapping. Now over here on the stopwatch, hold Alt and click. Now we've opened up the expressions. Type in the expression loop out, open parentheses, type equals cycle, close parentheses. Now we've created a loop for this composition. One thing you need to fix here is go one frame above this keyframe. You can use page up or down to go through frames. Set a new keyframe there, delete this one, and now you've got a looping animation for the entire 3 seconds. Next, we need to turn this image into a cylinder. To do that, go to Effect, Perspective, CC Cylinder. This will simulate the creation of a 3D cylinder. Now it basically just wraps your composition, but since we use the motion tile effect, it looks like we're kind of zooming along this long cylinder. Of course, we need to be looking down the middle of it, so we're going to mess with these settings up here. First, we're going to open up the rotation. The X rotation needs to be set at -90 degrees. So now we're looking down the middle, and we can still see our images moving. It just doesn't look quite right. We're going to open up the position and move it backwards in negative space until it looks right. I found that -1650 is pretty good. Now we need to change the radius until it's about the size of an iris. I like 25. Finally, we're going to keyframe Y rotation just to give it a little more movement. So on your first frame, hit the stopwatch, go down to your last frame, and we're going to put -110. So now our cylinder spins while our images fly by. While we're at this point, we're going to go to Layer, New, Solid, create a new black solid, and just put it behind our grid so we have a black space back there. So now we're going to add a few more effects to emulate the look of Chuck's flash. To do that, we're going to create a new adjustment layer. First, we're going to go Effect, Color Correction, Tint. So that turns all of our image grid black and white. But we do want it to be colorized, so we'll go Effect, Color Correction, Hue and Saturation. Click Colorize, and we're going to keyframe the Colorize Hue. So make sure you're on your first frame and hit the stopwatch. Now, Chuck's colors start at a kind of yellow and end at a kind of green. So we're going to change the Colorize Hue to a yellowish color. You can change the saturation. You can change the lightness as well if you want. Now we're going to move down to our last frame and continue until it looks green. So now, over time, the image changes from yellow to green. Next, we're going to add a blur, so Effect, Blur and Sharpen, Radial Blur. We want it to be a zoom blur, and we're going to crank it up to 25. So now, it gives it kind of a more speedy look, like it's really flying by at a fast pace, but it renders a little bit faster than using actual motion blur. Finally, we're going to go Effect, Stylize, Glow. Turn the glow intensity down to 0.5, and we're done. Now we have a basic flash. Now something that changes in all of Chuck's flashes are the skills that he's kind of calling out. So if he needs to learn how to play guitar, music notes might fly by. Or if he needs to fight, then some images of karate are going to fly by. So that's what I've done. First I'm going to rename this composition to Flash just to keep track. Now I downloaded these vector images for karate off of my stock photo account. And when you're using vector images, you need to make sure to turn on collapse transformations. That's over here. If you don't see those switches, just toggle switches modes. It's this switch right here. You can basically see that if I were to scale this image up, it would begin to lose quality, but if I hit collapse transformation, everything looks much sharper. So next what we want to do is set this to screen mode. So go back down, toggle your switches modes, and choose screen. Now that basically removes all of the black, keeps all the white. Now we want to see the karate guys, not the background. So go Effect, Channel, Invert. Now we've got all these karate guys and none of the background. That's exactly what we want. So now duplicate the layer 3 to 4 times, and we're going to set a different mask on each layer. So choose a couple guys that you think look cool and just draw a mask around them. So choose your next layer. Now we're going to line all of these guys up in the middle, and also to make the animation a little easier, if you hit Y, you can drag the anchor point of your layer into the center of each man. So now when you scale them, they'll be a little easier to control. So once we've done that, pull each of them into the center of the eye. Now I'm going to turn off all of them except for one, just so it's a little easier to see. But basically what we're going to do here is animate each person to fly by the camera in 3D space. So hit your toggle switches modes and turn on the 3D switch for all of your layers and motion blur as well. And we'll turn on motion blur for the composition. So I'm going to push this guy back into 3D space. Then I'm going to keyframe his position. So choose the layer, hit P, and that'll pull up the position. Hit the keyframe, and I'm going to go up to 20 seconds, and by that point I want him to have flown by. Now since this is the first guy to pop up, hit T to turn on opacity. Let's keyframe that and move forward 5 seconds and make him fully opaque. So he goes from 0 to 100 and he flies by the camera. Now to make this easier on myself, I'm going to pull his position keyframes back up, select them both, edit, copy, and then I'm going to paste them onto the next layer. Turn that back on, and now he's going to fly by. But I don't really want to use the opacity, and so a trick that I've used is to go to where the last karate guy fully takes up the frame and then set the first frame here. So now it doesn't look like he just appears out of nowhere, he's just behind him. Now in Chuck, on the last guy here, instead of flying by the camera, he generally stops right about here. And he just pauses for the exit animation. Now the last thing we're going to do for the basics here is drop this under the adjustment layer, so it kind of blends with the rest of the composition. So here's what we've got so far. Now I don't really like how smooth these flybys are, so I'm going to add an expression to their position keyframes. So Alt-click on the stopwatch and type wiggle 3, 5. Basically what that's going to do is just add a little bit of randomness to their motion. Now if you click on the position property, you can go up, hit edit, copy expression only, and then paste it onto the other layers. So now they all have this expression, and it's especially noticeable here in this last flyby that stands still. Now he doesn't just sit there, he moves a little bit. So I think we're ready to move on to the final composition. So take your flash composition and create a new one. We're going to title this main. Go into your composition settings, and we'll make this 5 seconds long. I have downloaded a image of an eye off of my stock image account. So we're going to put that right there, and he will be visible for about the first second. And then we can duplicate that layer and bring it down to the end as well. Now basically what we're aiming for is to suck into the eye, see the flash, and then pull back out. The first effect we're going to add is to the first opening eye, so make sure that layer is selected and choose Effect, Distort, Optics Compensation. Check Reverse Lens Distortion, and we'll go to about frame 10. Keyframe the field of view, and let's go 20 frames forward, and we're going to crank it up. And as you can see, it looks like we're flying into this eye. Now let's go about 10 frames back, and that's where we're going to have our flash start to appear. I'm going to put that on top of the eye. Basically what we want to do is kind of animate this so it starts here and opens out. So I'm going to use an ellipse mask. If you see a rectangle or something, you can click and hold and select ellipse. So we're going to go into the middle here, click and hold Shift and Control, and it creates a circular mask in the middle. So let's make one to about here. Open up the mask expansion. We're going to bring that way down. To a point. Keyframe it, and then go 10 frames forward. And we're going to turn it all the way up. So this kind of takes some tweaking just to get the keyframes right. We're also going to mess with the feather so it doesn't look so sharp. Okay, so now we've got the basic animation. You can mess with this all day and get it perfect, but I'm just trying to show you basically how you want to set it up. So now we've got the fly into the eye, and we need to fly back out. So we get to this point, and we're basically going to do the same effect with the optical compensation. So go Effect, Optics Compensation, Reverse Lens Distortion, keyframe the field of view, go to the last frame, and crank it up. Something about like that. Now we're going to bring our closing eye in, and we're going to do the same thing except in reverse. Now if you want to, you can select the previous eye layer, hit U, that'll bring up its keyframes. You can select the keyframes, hit Control C or edit copy, select the other layer, hit Control V or edit paste, and now you can see we've pasted the effect and the keyframes. Now make sure that reverse lens distortion is still on, and you can see that instead of zooming out of the eye, we're zooming back into it, and that's not what we want. So select both keyframes, right click them, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. Now we fly back out. So let's see what the whole thing looks like now. And this is the final basis for this effect. You could go back and add maybe some camera shake, more karate guys flying by, make it a little faster and more hectic. Definitely add some sound effects. But I wanted to give you a solid start on how I created this. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave a comment. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you can use this in the future, maybe to make some Chuck fan films.